Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another episode of our WCNFluencer podcast. And goodness gracious, St. Ignatius, Heather, I'm talking to a professional today, and I'm trying to be a professional. I've got all this new equipment, and we're just going to kind of run with this today because, as you know, comedy is really kind of helps us get through some of our days.
Oh, yes, absolutely. If without comedy, I don't know how me and my family would have gotten through it. I mean, one example in caregiving for my dad, my mom used this like old, long, short shoehorn for seniors as a poop sword. You're familiar?
Oh, we're gonna get into that today.
She used to sing like a funny song with it, which is how else do you get through something so unpleasant as chopping your paralyzed husband, like, well,
Well,
the
the word Richard and I used in those times was pooperama.
Pooporama. Yeah, that stuff is such a big part of it, but I don't mean to derail your opener.
We'll get into the poop discussion later because it is one of the ways to deal with those types of situations in caregiving is kind of the humor side of that because it could be very daunting. But goodness, welcome. It's so nice to meet you and visit with you. And you've been in the arts, as I understand it, most of your career, and you've got quite a show coming up.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I have my very first solo show, QuickSand, at the Hollywood Fringe Festival this June. I had been a comedian in my 20s and making videos since I was a teenager, and then around the age of 30, which was 14 years ago, I started NYU's grad
That's
film
still 30.
school.
It's still
Yeah,
that math still works to 30. So
the math works. And I started NYU's grad film school because there were no more jobs after the 2008 financial crisis. So I became a filmmaker, and I've directed a ton of indie stuff and gotten very close to my big break, but it hasn't quite happened yet.
well, we're gonna try to make it help make it happen for you today. But your dad suffered a stroke in 2010. Tell
That's
us
right.
tell us how your caregiving experience unfolded.
Well, yeah, that was a huge surprise. He suffered a severe stroke, which left him partially paralyzed, and he could only speak a few words, yes, no, and okay. And I would say that there was a physical challenge to caregiving for him, of course, because of how he was paralyzed, but also I would say the speech challenge was harder emotionally and harder to grapple with. He could take in language, he could read and understand what
Right.
you were saying, but for him to put it out, that's a different part of the brain. So some of your listeners are probably familiar with aphasia and
Yeah.
apraxia. So
Yeah.
that's what he had. I mean, it was a massive journey. My mom, I would say, took on what I would say is 95% of the work in the home. But I filled in whenever I could to give her a break or if I was needed, and so did my sister. And towards the end, he had hospice nurses because he passed. Actually, it's tomorrow. It'll be a year.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. What
yeah,
timing.
the timing is great. When I realized, because I'd wanted to do a show about all of what we've learned after the stroke, um, and I had written a feature film before he passed, and I'd been trying to develop it for TV. And then once he actually passed, I was like, I don't want to wait anymore. I'm just getting my butt on stage. I'm making something from this. So that's why it's a little soon. And I feel okay, do you know about Death Cafe?
I do know a little bit about Death Cafe. Yes.
So I love Death Cafe. We got a kitty photo bomber, video
It's kitty
bomber.
photo bomb. That's happened
Yeah.
before. It's okay.
So I go to Death Cafe, and when I was there, and I could tell the listeners more about what Death Cafe is. Do you think they want to know, or they know
Yes.
already?
Yeah. Oh, very
Oh,
much
sure.
so.
Okay.
This is all about trusted information and referral so people can find the comfort that they're looking for. Sure.
Oh, good. Well, I wound up at this Death Cafe without really knowing much about it, but there's two rules to Death Cafe, which was started in 2010 in London. And the rules are or maybe it wasn't 20, I'm just 2010s on the brain. Anyway. The rules are everyone gathers to talk about death, and there has to be snacks. So there's always a refreshment. It's wonderful, and they're all over the world, so you can find one near you. And it's
Yeah.
not a grieving circle, although grief is part of it.
Right.
Um, but it's a wonderful place where a great cross section of people of all different walks of life get together, and it's never small talk. But it was at the Death Cafe that I realized I'm doing my show at the 1 year anniversary of all this stuff. So, it's like my first death anniversary for my dad. He had a stroke also on June 9th, and then June 10th is my birthday.
There is, if you're, and I kind of am into this, there's some really strong messages here about timing. And I believe things happen for a reason, like you and I just kind of out of the sky blue kind of connecting. I'm a big believer that things happen for a reason, and it's up to us to find out what that reason is. And it's like, I hope it's okay for me to say, we're just getting to know each other. I'm so proud of you for able to just put this show on stage to help so many people who are going through the same type of health calamities that you and your father and mother and your entire family went through.
That's such a sweet thing to say, that I like moved me to got like a tiny tear going to tell me that you're proud of me. Like, me hearing that made me feel so like, wow, because I care. First of all, I reached out to you because I want to reach the caregiving community. I want not only for people who don't know anything about these things to be able to empathize with people going through it, but I really want people who've been through it to feel seen in, in depicting caregiving, elder care, natural death, all these topics. I mean, when I witnessed my dad's death, which I felt was a miracle, was miraculous, and I thought, oh my God, why aren't our storytellers? Everyone will witness death at some point. Why are we just like bang bang you're dead in movies and television? It's
right.
It's so much more than that.
I think we've known each other forever, because that's exactly. I have this phrase that I've used for years now. It's because it proves to be true. It's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And I know for a fact that folks who are in after caregiving, like we are, who stay in it as advocates, want to share the story to be able to help those who are coming after us, because everybody's going to get their turn.
Everyone's going to get their turn. And, there's another layer to this, which is my dad actually wasn't my only relationship with caregiving. It's kind of been a lifetime of this in my life. I mean, first, my dad's dad, he had cancer, and he came with us for his last year of his life when I was in 4th grade. So it's sort of a little intro. My mom, I still feel like, and she was a working mom. She still did a lot of the work, kind of how my mother's mother died caregiving for my grandpa, by the way. That's a thing we all know. So there's these layers and things.
It's all these layers, sure.
So it was my grandpa, and then about a year after my grandpa, we took care of him because my dad's mom was severely schizophrenic, and she couldn't take care of him once he had cancer. And so she came to live with us when I was in high school, and she was an unmedicated schizophrenic, so it was a real adventure. I love her so much, and she lived until I was in college. Around the year 2000 is when she passed. And then years later, my dad's older brother was also schizophrenic, and he had become he was institutionalized in the late 70s, and he had been sort of lost in the system and patient privacy laws. We couldn't find his last address, and I went on a mission to find him because I felt for him, like this man who I don't know if he's dead or alive, and that's made me sad. And so in 2018, I found him. And so I became his de facto caregiving contact for the end of his life. So I didn't physically caregive. But for example, while my dad was signing his hospice paperwork and all kinds of stuff, and I at least was able to be helpful to authorize his hospice and all kinds of stuff. And also reconnect him to his youngest brother, who is still alive, because we all live kind of far away from him, but that brother lives in Mexico now, and he the one that passed, or the schizophrenic brother, he passed a few weeks ago, actually. So all this stuff's going on.
All this stuff is going on, and I say this because I think it's important for non-caregivers to hear, and I hope there are some non-caregivers listening to our program today, is that nobody has this on their bucket list of things to do in life. All these things happen at a
Yes,
moment's notice. They're an emergency. You know, all of us caregivers know this.
yes,
And the message that we're trying to convey to folks is even if you could just prepare just a little bit, it makes it a little bit easier. And one of the things that you were just saying about your own, I mean, you weren't physically caregiving, but you were there to help with the paperwork, to do something that nobody else was doing for him,
right. And
to make
actually,
that
like
just a tad bit easier.
his funeral paperwork wasn't even done with him, and he passed like 2 weeks after I finally figured that out. So,
Yeah. It's those
you know,
conversations that we don't have. So,
yes. And I had so
yeah.
many warnings from dad. Like shortly after my dad passed, there were things going on with my mom, and I realized, okay, this stuff doesn't happen immediately. And I am
Mhm.
mentally ramping up. I'm like, I said, I had a conversation with my mom, like, okay, if the day comes that you can't take care of yourself, I will live with you, but it has to be somewhere like that I want to live.
Yeah.
So I might move back. I'm in LA now, but I might move back to New York City because I
Mhm.
can do all the things I want to do with my life there. And then she's
Yeah.
closer to her friends and my family out there because she's in New Jersey, and or she's willing to come to LA, but I would feel bad to make her too
Take her.
isolated from, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, we'll see when that bridge is
When that
crossed.
day comes, you'll be prepared to make the decision because
Exactly.
you've already thought it through. So,
We also had a whole prep year too of like as much as we knew that my dad wasn't doing well and he would pass, there were certain funeral arrangements we hadn't made. And in 2022, because he passed last year in 2023, his hospice nurse told us he was dying and he actually had COVID and she didn't test him. So like I got on a plane and everything and he had I was so frustrated that in the year 2023, 2022 she wouldn't test him for that. But
mhm.
the positive is I was able to caregive for my mom and dad who had the COVID because I had just had COVID. So hey, I was
Yeah.
able to be there for that. But we had that year headway of like make the decisions for his funeral now.
Mm.
So yeah, any heads up, you start changing the way you approach things
Exactly.
going forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So, why quicksand? I mean, I think I know
Oh,
the answer to that, but um, because I mean, I get the I get the metaphor 100%. But
yeah, this thinking. Well, I had organically felt about my life at the time because, I'm this filmmaker and I've gotten very close to big breaks, like I said, and something was about to happen. I mean, there was this famous guy in my film school class who kept being like, "Hey, come, we're filming this thing over in Vancouver. Like, come with us." And I was like, "I can't. I can't forget this conversation." I said, "I can't." And he's like, "Why not?" I'm like, "I literally need to help wipe my dad's ass." And he goes, "Ew, you have to wipe your dad's ass." And I was like, "Not a fan anymore. You are juvenile for that reaction." But anyway, the quicksand is I had felt like I was sinking in quicksand every time there was just this zigzag of like things happening in my life, and then suddenly I would have to cancel things and drop everything, and also the emotional impact. You cancel things because you're the emotional and physical impact, actually, like you physically can't, maybe there's too much work going on. It's a big it's a big, I mean, it's life happening. You could call it an interruption or it's actually life happening, the real part of life. But I felt like I was sinking and kept struggling to get out, and then I'd sink again.
right.
And now I kind of refer to friends going through their own crap as like that's the quicksand of life. Like the director for my show was supposed to fly out to our tech rehearsal this weekend, and he had a family emergency. And I said, if anyone understands, I completely understand.
Exactly.
Like the quicksand of life, and it's okay.
That could be a part of the show too. Because it it drives the point home. And I
Yeah,
think,
and I use. Oh, sorry.
no, I'm a go. No, go. I interrupted you. I
Oh
have
no,
four
that's
sisters,
okay.
so I was trained well. So
I'm from New Jersey, so I was trained poorly. We are horrible interrupters. I've had to learn the craft. But the quicksand actually is a whole layer creatively to both the live show and what I'd been developing for television with this show. Um, which in the television show, you know that TV show Ally McBeal?
Oh yeah, boy, I
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah.
So she would interact with things that weren't there, like a dancing baby.
Krista Flockhart, I think was
Oh,
that
yeah, Callista Flockhart,
Callista
fabulous.
Flockhart? Yeah.
I loved Ally McBeal so much,
Yeah.
but so the quicksand space, that aspect of what I'd want the television show to be, is this sort of surrealist space. It's not a dream space, but it's a space where the characters can sort of interact with their emotional lives. So, for example, there would be some version of my dad, maybe it's puppet or claymation or something, and he can talk, and we can talk. So all kinds of surrealist things. So I'd been developing that for TV, and I thought, how do I adapt that for the stage? So on stage, there's going to be, I mean, spoiler for some of it, but there's going to be this puppet, life-size puppet version of my dad we've built in a wheelchair, and I'm going to sort of do this Charlie Chaplin-ish demonstration of caregiving, which I thought would be better than maybe telling a bunch of caregiving stories that are difficult. That I'm going to show you a bit of what that's like. And then I sink in quicksand, and there's like this quicksand fairy played by Joy Nash, who's so great. And she comes to try to rescue me out of the quicksand. So there's
I am
that
so
in addition to the
excited.
storytelling.
I have to. If I had a Whole Care Network corporate jet, I'd be right over. So.
Well, I first of all hope to do this. I hope this is just a first run of the show, and that I can bring
Sure.
it to other places, and that I can turn it, into TV.
You might see the sign behind me. If you could dream it, you can do it. And I think you've got the dream, and you can do it. And anything that we can do to help you make that happen, I'm in.
You're already doing it. This conversation, it means a lot to me to have real caregivers listening in, and you connected me to another podcast, the Love Conquers All.
Love Conquers Alls with Susie Singer Carter and Don Priest. They have quite the story themselves, especially Susie with her mom, as I'm sure she's probably has mentioned. And goodness, there's a number of podcasters on the Whole Care Network that we can introduce you to as well. But we really want to support you and your work in any way that we can to help get the message out. But I want to go back to comedy just for a second, because the conversation has been caregiving conversation can be heavy, but there is a lot of levity in caregiving. There are some fun moments, and I think one of the things I learned along the way was that while you're in the midst of it, those days just, oh my God, what is it ever going to end? What is it going to? Then when it does end, and it does end for everybody, we recognize those good days far outweighed the bad days. It's just those bad days were so intense.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And the memory, it's interesting. Well, I was a philosophy major. There was this guy, I think his name was Miller, and he had this thing about suffering and how you remember suffering differently. Like a thorn of a rose, you might remember more than the beauty of the rose. But, I'm really paraphrasing here, but I think when I think about a rose, I'm thinking about the beauty of the rose, more than the thorn. Like if I were to be pricked by it, of course I'd have the pain left over. Anyway, I'm just thinking about the way we remember things differently. But when I think about my dad and my mom and all, I think about laughs and jokes,
Right.
and I think I immediately get images of pee and stuff coming out of the commode, and my mom's chasing it and laughing. My dad, oh God, one of my favorite, because so he was hyper emotive after the stroke, which meant he laughed or cried more easily. So sometimes it happened inappropriately. And the most extreme example was because we kept trying to take my dad everywhere to be like, we can still do this. We can still do that.
Right. Because we don't want life to change we don't want all of our life to change. So.
Yes. And then when you try to do it, and then it's really hard because the world is not built for wheelchairs, even when they say something's accessible. It's like, there's a step here. What are you talking about? Or there's no bars in this bathroom, but we tried so many things. But once I took him to the Lincoln Center ballet, and he just started laughing loudly at the ballet, which is you're really not there to laugh.
Oh no.
And he laughed, and we're like, Dad, stop, stop it. And he started laughing at himself laughing because he recognized that.
He was,
So we got halfway through the show, and I had to like wheel him out, and we had to leave.
but you do it with good intentions. You want, when we're in the midst of it, we want things to be like they were.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. And you just realize like, okay, that's not going to be fun for us anymore. But the trying, like bringing him into New York City, beach. Oh, forget. Have you tried beach wheelchairs?
Oh, no, I didn't have that experience. I've seen them.
I'm so glad that they exist, and I think they're really good for certain people. My dad was 6'1" with like a paralyzed big belly that couldn't walk, so kept getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Big guy
Mm-hmm.
pushing someone that heavy, like that weight over a dune is like in the summer. It's so exhausting and hard. And you
You
do
didn't
all that,
realize
and
you had
then
all that strength.
we all found it, but doing all that and you get him all the way out there and then suddenly he's like, no, no, like I want to go back, or like he
I want
has
to
to
go back.
pee and he can't pee there. Ugh.
Those stories are, it's so important for caregivers, especially those who aren't connected um, to any type of support or a family that's not helpful, and they feel kind of isolated, because we all felt isolated at one time, whether or not we were or not. We all felt isolated,
Yeah.
and I just want things the way they used to be. Well, they're never going
They're
to
never
be
gonna
like
be.
they're
The
like they.
isolation's the like such a crucial point, and it's an aspect of caregiving that affects all kinds of caregiving. So we're mostly talking about elder care, but I know it
Mhm.
affects, parents dealing with children and all that. Like it's very isolating. It's very removable. I have so many mom friends who apologize for, oh, I'm so sorry. I've got the kids, or the kids are here, and I'm like, it's okay. It's
Mhm.
okay. But it really can take you out of life and you feel alone. And, after my dad passed, my mom's still grappling with like, the kind of the bit of the why me part. Like,
Right.
why was it this extreme? Why was it, you know, this happened when she was 60 years old, working in New York City, a thriving businesswoman and loved it. And then she was suddenly, saddled to home prematurely. Um, and she lost, more than a decade of doing that.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's a lot of things though where like she also wasn't ready for him to go. She's very sad that he's gone, and he wasn't ready to go either. You would think, someone with so many limitations would be ready to go, but he fought to stay with us. Um, yeah, but the isolation of it is something that shouldn't be, because so many of us are faced with it. We need to
Hmm.
talk about it and depict it and normalize it and laugh together and share stories, just like you're doing on your
Just like
podcast.
you're doing. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what we're all about, is sharing stories, because I believe there's comfort. Uh, it's cathartic for the story sharer, and there's comfort in the listener because they realize they're not alone. And we get the opportunity to meet people who we most likely would never meet, and recognize that, you know what, are we're pretty similar. We all want three things. We want to love, care, and we're going to have love, care, and commitment for the person that's entrusted in our care, with as little drama from outside entities as possible. And by you creating QuickSand, this wonderful show, you're going to be demonstrating to so many people out there not only the important role of a caregiver, but how you help others along the way. It's just a delight to get to know you and meet you. Thank you.
I agree. I'm so glad to talk and meet you, and learn also. Before I came on the show, you let me know about some film projects that you are also trying to get
Uh,
up
we're,
and running. So
we're trying to get the My Green folder up and running, but this is all about you. This is not about me. We'll do another, but
it's
let
us.
all of our, it's us, right? But let all of our listeners and our viewers know where, and we'll have all this in the show notes and the comment section, but where the show's going to be performing, how people can get in contact with you. Give us all the details.
Great. If you just Google QuickSand Hollywood Fringe, it is at Hollywood Fringe this June, 5 shows all through the month, and you'll see the ticket link when you Google Hollywood Fringe QuickSand. My name is Heather Fink. That's Fink. Sometimes people hear sink, but not like kitchen sink. Fink. And actually, if you just Google me, my website, heatherfink.com, will come up. There's an email there. You can reach out to me that way. I'm on Instagram at Leatherfink, because I wore leather pants in high school. It was a nickname. I just started TikToking at QuickSand Show.
I've threatened to do the TikTok, but goodness, I don't know.
I just started for a week. I've been doing it. And that's probably, that's all the info you need.
Well, Heather, with the great work that you are doing, you are certainly a WCNFluencer, and it's so great to have you a part of the network. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.